The BCS era gave us some of the greatest teams college football has ever seen, including the Trojan dynasty.
Extremely well. And there's the middle screen to Bush. And he's got running room. 20, 10, touchdown, Southern Cal.
The Longhorns that beat them.
He's going for the corner. He's got it.
And those Gators who took over the back half of the decade.
Three. Lofted into the end zone. Touchdown. Now.
But not all the best teams finished the job. Some of the most talented teams we've ever seen never won it all. Some of them were just one game away. Others, one moment away from being forever immortalized. So in today's video, we're going to look at the teams that almost had everything, but fell just short when it mattered most.
Davis gets a block. Davis has another block. Chris Davis. No flag.
If we rewind back to 1998, you probably remember Tennessee finally breaking through, or the late season chaos that would come to define the era. But lost in all that was the best team in the country, a team that could have won it all if just one game goes differently.
Montgomery stood up in the hole. Did not get there.
In 1998, Ohio State was loaded with talent. David Boston was a defense's nightmare on the perimeter. If you tried to stop him, they'd give the rock to Michael Wiley, who'd carve you up. And if you somehow slowed them both down, their All-American defense could blanket you. Add in 2 straight years of falling just short, and the Buckeyes had the perfect mix of talent and motivation to finally prove that they were college football's best.
They fake to him, they throw to the end zone, touchdown Boston!
After smashing West Virginia, a preseason title contender in week 1, the Buckeyes got rolling, dropping 35 on Missouri and 45 on Minnesota before adding another 40 against Indiana. But while the offense was dynamic, the defense was arguably even more impressive, allowing only 9 points per game in their first 7 weeks. And if you made a mistake, they made sure you paid for it.
Auburn out of here with pretty good. They block it! Ball's in the end zone, touchdown!
Going into November, they were hands down the best team. They'd blown out every single opponent and were expected to do the same to a 4-4 Michigan State team. But a young Nick Saban had different plans. While his Spartans got put on their heels, they wouldn't quit. Even after a brutal start to the second half, they regrouped and then started to flip the script. Suddenly, they had the Buckeye offense stalling, while their own offense chopped away at the lead. Before you knew it, Michigan State was winning, and in the blink of an eye, Ohio State's championship season came crashing down.
Throws Miller, intercepted. Hole's got it.
But what makes this thing even worse is how the season ended. The Buckeyes went on to roll Michigan before easily taking care of business in the Sugar Bowl, leaving Buckeye fans dreaming of what could have been if just one half went the other way. Yet, at least those Buckeyes controlled their own destiny, because this next team outscored their final 3 opponents 113-13 and somehow got taken out of the national championship.
Now, the BCS computers boosted Florida State into tomorrow night's championship game against Oklahoma, even though Miami beat the Seminoles 27-24.
In the year 2000, the U was back. After 5 years of living in college football purgatory, the Canes once again had a roster overflowing with talent and swagger. If you were somehow able to stop Santana Moss from taking the top off of defense, you still had to worry about Reggie Wayne. Oh, and also the constant threat of Clinton Portis out of the backfield. But what was even more terrifying stood on the other side. Dan Morgan was the nation's best defender, and behind him stood a future NFL Hall of Famer.
He tipped away. Edward Reed, number 20.
But for as dynamic as these Canes were, they did slip up out of the gates. Yet from there, it was pure domination. The offense dropped 40 or more in every game but 3, while the defense was allowing only 15 points per game. This deadly combination was on full display against second-ranked Virginia Tech. They looked unstoppable as Jeremy Shockey got in the action, Santana Moss housed an 80-yarder, and then Ed Reed took back a pick 6 in a 41-point beatdown.
Reed intercepted. Edward Reed's got his second of the day.
And he's got some room.
And he's got some room. There goes Reed, and he'll take it to the house. The 7th defensive touchdown by the Hurricanes this year.
But what should have been this team's crowning achievement ended up becoming their nightmare.
No doubt that we should be playing Oklahoma for the national championship.
Back on October 7th, the Canes welcomed Florida State, the top-ranked team and the defending champs. Yet, it was Miami who looked like the championship team, taking it to the Seminoles down in the Orange Bowl. And even though Florida State fought back, Ken Dorsey and Jeremy Shockey responded, before Miami walked away with a win in absolute thrilling fashion.
He's got the distance. He does not have the kick.
Now, you'd think beating the top-ranked team, plus the second-ranked team, and beating your final 3 opponents by 100 points should have been enough. But when the final rankings came out, Miami was left out, jumped by the very team they beat. So while the Canes made a statement down in the Sugar Bowl, they had to watch in pain as the Seminoles got embarrassed on the biggest stage. Now, we all know that Miami squad would get their revenge, as they went on to put together one of the most dominant seasons of all time. But in 2002, they should have been even better.
Grossman into the end zone, picked off. One man back, and Maurice Sykes will go.
Their talent level was off the charts. Offensively, Willis McGahee looked like a cheat code. Andre Johnson was arguably a bigger nightmare on the outside. Even worse, their defensive counterparts had one first-rounder after the next, highlighted by the sport's most intimidating safety.
The middle, in and out, and then caught, and now it's a loose ball.
And immediately, this talent showed they had real horsepower, averaging 47 points per game in their first 5 games. So you had to take chances to keep up, which you paid for, because these Canes could strike at any moment on any side of the ball. But most importantly, they had the will of a champion, making the play when it was needed most, and finding ways to win by any inch necessary.
For the win, the kick on the way. He missed it, wide left.
Which led them to one final game with history on the line. But this year, it wouldn't be a cakewalk. The Buckeyes pressured Dorsey into mistakes while taking out Miami's #1 weapon. The Canes' historical streak was suddenly on the brink, but just then, their championship switch flipped as they forced overtime, scored first, then made the play to close the game out.
Into the end zone, and it is incomplete.
Or so they thought, as a late flag flew in, blessing the Buckeyes, and ripped immortality right out of Miami's hands. But for as controversial as that Fiesta Bowl was, Miami still had a chance to win the game, unlike this next team, who never even got their shot.
Do you continue to use that as motivation for your players, or you just let it go and refocus and do something else?
Well, really, the message is very clear to our football team.
Going into 2003, the Trojans looked like one big promising question mark. Their Heisman leader left a gaping hole as he was off to the NFL. Stepping into his shoes was a former top recruit, but one with no college experience. He had the freshman All-American Mike Williams returning on the perimeter, but his backfield was mainly bright-eyed freshman blue chippers. Plus, their defense's heart and soul followed Palmer to the NFL. The talk around town was if they'd be able to replace what they'd lost, and that question would be put to the test immediately.
Here's Reinert deep in the end zone, touchdown!
After dominating the 6th-ranked Tigers in Week 1, USC went on an absolute tear. The offense was dropping 40 points per game. The Liner to Williams connection looked even more dangerous than the Palmer one. Plus, those bright-eyed freshman stars started to glimmer. Lendell was starting to punish defenders on the way to the end zone, while Reggie flashed a level of explosiveness that was rare across college football. Tack on a ferocious defense, and the Trojans quickly looked like the sport's best. But in this era, perfection was required, which these young Trojans learned the value of out in Berkeley. But even with the loss, USC's resume was hard to ignore. Over the next 8 games, they scored 40 or more in all but one. And defensively, they were getting hot at the right time. Plus, was anyone perfect? LSU slipped up to Florida before the seemingly unbeatable Sooners got stunned in Arrowhead, which meant USC was back as the top-ranked team. A team with 2 top 10 wins and one of the nation's best offenses. Everything was pointing to one outcome until the final rankings came out.
He mirrored the coaches. So as a result, after we get these polls, what do we have in the BCS standings? Oh no. Inverting.
USC was stunned, having to settle for a Rose Bowl win over Michigan, while LSU took out Oklahoma in the national championship, giving us the exact scenario that BCS was created to avoid, and never giving us the answer we desperately wanted. But for as painful as that decision was for USC, Auburn would experience something that become unthinkable only a few years later. In the early 2000s, Auburn was talented, but could just not get over the hump. In 2004, that all changed.
Reggie Brown, popped by Junior Rose Green, he's down, the ball is out.
Their defense was ferocious. The front 7 shut down offenses. If you somehow slipped through, the secondary was filled with erasers. But for as relentless as that unit was, the offense was even more formidable. Their backfield was unmatched. Cadillac Williams exploded onto the scene last year, and now is arguably college football's best back, while his backmate, Ronnie Brown, was arguably even more dangerous. But for as tenacious as the Tigers were, their schedule was brutal. Yet that didn't stop them from blanking the defending champs, rolling over a top 10 Tennessee team, and dominating a top 5 Georgia team. The defense was the #1 unit in the country, averaging only 11 points per game. Meanwhile, the offense was averaging 32 points per game, as their dynamic duo ran around defenders, caught touchdowns over them, and when teams overcommitted, even threw some touchdowns.
The tight end, Anthony Mix, touchdown.
They got Thomas Davis.
So by the end of the year, Auburn had done everything you could have asked for. 3 top 10 wins, undefeated SEC champs, yet still they remained the third option, which meant they were forced to settle for the Sugar Bowl while watching another team botch an opportunity that should have been theirs.
Might have the touchdown.
But Auburn's loss was USC's gain, because on the flip side, the Trojans had officially become champions. Yet they hadn't even reached their scariest form. Because going into 2005, Leinart could have sailed off to the NFL as the Heisman winner, but he came back to make history. He had arguably his most talented perimeter weapons yet. But what struck fear into the heart of his opponents was what those bright-eyed freshmen had now evolved into. Lendell was a full-blown unstoppable force. Meanwhile, Reggie was no longer just explosive. Now, he was must-see TV.
Comes back to the near side of the field. He is going to go. It's going to be another USC touchdown and another thing of beauty.
From the jump, these Trojans were burying teams, scoring 133 points in their first 2 games alone. But it didn't matter who the opponent was, as with a top 10 schedule, they averaged nearly 50 points per game. Leinart threw for 4,000 yards. Reggie added another 3,000 yards on his way to the Heisman. And even when their backs were against the wall, like a true champion, they fought, putting together historical moments on the national stage.
He get ahead. He got in. Touchdown, SC.
So by the time the championship came around, it felt like a formality, because it was supposed to be the crowning moment for a historical dynasty. But unfortunately for them, a superhero stood across from them, a team that immediately showed they were USC's equal, even when the Trojans felt like they were pulling away. Vince Young put on a cape only few in the sport have ever been able to wear, ultimately ripping immortality right out of Reggie and Leinart's hands.
He's going for the corner. He's got it.
In the blink of an eye, one of the greatest teams we've ever seen got stuffed short by something no team in history could have stopped. But for as gut-wrenching as that was for the Trojans, nothing compares to the heartbreak that came 2 years later. 2007 was the year the Mountaineers had been building towards. From the time they exploded against Georgia, Pat White and Steve Slayton were destined to reach the pinnacle of the sport. And by now, the West Virginia spread offense was impossible to contain. Whether it was White's dual threat ability or Slayton's game-breaking speed, the Mountaineer offense was always a moment away from flipping the script.
Open field. Inside the 30. Got a convoy ahead of him. Slayton down the sideline. Touchdown.
Now, this team wasn't perfect, but by November, they were absolutely rolling. Slayton tore through a talented Rutgers team. Pat White went superhero mode against Louisville, all while the defense had become a top 10 unit nationally.
Touchdown.
So after they dropped 66 on UConn, it felt like the national championship was inevitable. All they had to do was win one more game, a home matchup against 4-7 Pittsburgh. But this was the year of the curse, and the Panthers were ready to brawl. Immediately, something fell off. Chip shot field goals were missed. The offense stalled. Then Pat White got hurt, and panic set in. Before they knew it, the Mountaineers were down to a final play, but their moment never came. Instead, the Panthers pulled off an upset for the ages.
And denied them a place in a national championship game.
But what makes this loss all the more painful is how West Virginia finished the year. They went on to absolutely annihilate third-ranked Oklahoma, leaving Mountaineer fans knowing that they had the horsepower to be champions, if not for one game. But for as good as that West Virginia offense was, almost nothing in history compared to the revolution this next team was creating.
Looking for a block. James still on the sideline. Shakes another tackle. James, touchdown.
In 2010, the Oregon Ducks were changing college football. Chip Kelly's system had plays getting called in and run in just seconds. Defenses barely had time to think as they panicked with communication, eventually getting broken down and busted open by the second half. Darren Thomas was like a skilled marksman operating the system. And as he broke defenses down, the possibility of the dynamic duo standing next to him popping off a game-swinging run became almost a guarantee. By October, these Ducks were one of college football's best, and for good reason. They had scored 40 or more in every single game, including a 52-point onslaught over 9th-ranked Stanford, a game that saw their offense go for 626 yards, while the defense became a turnover machine. From there, they became like a video game. 60 against UCLA, then 53 the following week at 23rd-ranked USC. But even when they had an off day, they still had the champion resolve to make the plays needed to get the win. So after their 37-point outing in Corvallis, it seemed like they would finish off their revolutionary story.
Michael James straight up the middle. That should earn him a trip to New York.
But unfortunately for Duck fans, Superman stood across from them in their very last game. Cam Newton had taken over the sport in 2010, putting the Tigers on his back in jaw-dropping fashion.
Loose.
Oh, did he accelerate?
How about
my goodness!
touchdown?
And in the title game, it was no different as he worked Duck defenders. His own defense was disrupting Oregon, never allowing them to get into rhythm. Yet Oregon never quit, showing championship pedigree once again, this time with a fourth quarter comeback that had them minutes away from becoming champions. But their ultimate downfall may have come down to some bad luck, which turned into a kick that erased their chances of becoming forever sketched into history.
Auburn wins the BCS National Championship.
And just like those Ducks, this next team also knew a thing or two about dominance. To be honest, if you combined Oregon's offense with this team's defense, you're likely looking at an all-time great.
The 15 running backwards, loose, free ball, touchdown, LSU, Matthew.
In 2011, LSU raised a different question entirely. How do you beat a team you simply can't get through? It started with a defense that owned game. Up front, it made every single inch feel earned, which made you have to try and get past Maurice Claiborne, their all-American eraser. But what made this unit different was what happened when you made a mistake, because that's when the Honey Badger showed up. A Heisman finalist who had Ed Reed-like game-changing ability.
Matthew deflected, picked off, Matthews.
But what made this unit truly elite was who they were doing it against. In the regular season, these Tigers went 8-0 against ranked teams, averaging nearly 35 points per game on offense, with blossoming NFL talent on the perimeter. On the other side, the defense was giving up only 11 points per game. And that didn't even tell the whole story, because the defense and special teams were putting points on the board themselves. Claiborne proved how much of an eraser he was with each game, while Matthew continued to tilt games at a moment's notice. Even as the competition hit Heisman mode, the defense matched the difficulty level. And that's also when their stars shined the brightest.
There are no flags and the race is on. And Matthew goes 92 yards.
So after those stars dominated Georgia to bring the SEC championship back to LSU with ease, the top-ranked Tigers were a game away from the history books. It wouldn't be easy, but they already went toe-to-toe with Bama and had the playmakers to do it again. But down in New Orleans, everything changed. There were no more missed kicks this time, no mistakes. LSU stars tried to take over, but they were forced to watch a methodical beatdown, because on the other side, Bama's defense completely stifled the Tiger offense, all around physically overwhelming them, as the Tide went on to put together one of the most dominant performances in history.
And Richardson breaks free on the sideline, end zone. How about that? Finally, a touchdown between these two.
So for as lethal as those Tigers look, they learned that no one matches up with the invincibility of Saban's Alabama dynasty.
Wide open. Touchdown, Alabama.
Because in the early 2010s, the Saban dynasty was peaking. They were back-to-back champs. But in 2013, they looked like they had the scariest version of them all. Not only did they have the bulk of their NFL talent coming back, but all that was also getting supplemented with a terrifying top-ranked recruiting class. So they could beat you in every way imaginable. They weren't running through you, they were throwing it over the top. And if you tried to make a play, they took it back to the house. Not to mention the special teams threat. This was a top-to-bottom stacked team that was destined to make history.
His way with might be a touchdown. Nobody's going to catch T.J. Yeldon. He's gone.
And in the first 2 months, they were even more horrifying than they appeared. The defense and special teams rolled the Hokies in week 1 before the offense showed that they had the firepower if necessary, as they got revenge in an epic duel against Johnny Football. But from there, the defense went to simply another level. For nearly 2 months, they let up only 2 touchdowns, outscoring their opponents an insane 246-26. In fact, in their first 11 games, they only let up more than 10 points twice. This was while while the offense was routinely dropping 40 points a game. So after their beatdown over LSU, a three-peat looked inevitable. One final major test stood in their way: their bitter rivals. A team that had started to get this destiny feel, fresh off a miracle against Georgia. And now they had their shot to take out Goliath. Alabama had the talent advantage, but this was at Jordan-Hare, which meant anything could happen. Early on, Alabama was in control. It looked to be smooth sailing as they shot out to a 21-7 lead, but the Tigers clawed back, winning the third quarter to tie things up going into the fourth. And from there, it was pure cinema.
That is a 99-yard touchdown.
Because when Alabama struck, Auburn countered right back. It was clear to come down to who would have the ball last, and it looked like it was Alabama's lucky day. But as they set up to hit the game winner, the magic of Jordan-Hare took over and gave us history.
Touchdown, Auburn.
And with that, Alabama, a team destined to three-peat, fell one play short.